Hey, and welcome back to the course. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up our application 100% programmatically from the app delegate without storyboards. Now, the reason we're going to be doing this is so that we don't have to deal with storyboards throughout building out this application. This is a really popular approach, and you'll find it in the workplace quite a bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new Xcode project. Let's select single view app, and I'm going to call this Notes iOS app. I'm also not going to select core data, unit tests, or UI tests because we want to go from 0 to 1, right? I want to teach you how to build out this application without using any pre-built stuff, okay? And that's exactly what that use core data button does. We can still use core data in our application, but by deselecting that or not having it selected, we can write it 100% from scratch instead. So let's go ahead and not select those. Make sure Swift is selected for the language, and let's go ahead and hit next to create our application, and then create to put it inside of our directory of choice. Now, with this the way it is, we just have to get rid of our main.storyboard and a line inside of our info.plist to ensure that it is not in there, okay? So let's go ahead and delete our main.storyboard file and hit move to trash. And then if you try to run this right now, it will crash because our info.plist file here is trying to reference that main storyboard file. Let's go ahead and let's delete that file. And now when you compile it, nothing will be wrong, okay? So go ahead and compile that. And while that's compiling, I'll just show you here real quick before it builds what we'll kind of be getting at in this video, okay? So we want to set up a navigation stack, okay? So back in the completed app here, or somewhat completed app, you'll see that when I click on this, it goes to this other view controller with a nice title and it kind of animates over, okay? A lot of this is done with the UI navigation controller and a lot of it is done for us, but still 100% programmatic, okay? And I want to set you up in this video so that we can basically create our iOS apps really in tune with the iOS Apple Developer Human Interface Guidelines, which are Apple's rules for design, okay, app design. Okay, so let's go ahead and head back to our iOS app and you'll see a black screen, okay, from what we just compiled. Now this is because our view controller by default had a white screen and we didn't really need to set it inside of our view controller. So now what we need to do is we first need to give this view controller in viewcontroller.swift a view.background color of .yellow. And then if you compile this, it's still going to be black because this view controller isn't really being called anywhere. So we need to reference it inside of our app delegate and set it as the root view controller of our window after we declare it. So let's go into our app delegate.swift. Let's get rid of that comment and let's say window is equal to UI window to declare a window. And then let's say window.makeKeyInvisible with a question mark like that. And then window.root view controller, okay, is equal to, and then just view controller like that. Now, this basically just sets up our application 100% programmatically. You don't need to worry about all these methods, and they look a little intimidating, but they're actually really straightforward. They basically just allow us to run code based on what this title says, okay? So when our application becomes active, when it is about to terminate. Okay, so don't worry about those methods. We're not even going to be using them, but I wanted to let you know that they're nothing to be afraid of, even though they're kind of intimidating. At least they were intimidating for me when I first started iOS development. Okay, you'll see now that we have our view controller with a background color of yellow. And the last thing I want to do before exiting this video is I want to rename our view controller to something that actually makes a little more sense and is in tune with our application, okay? So let's go ahead and let's call this folders controller here in the viewcontroller.swift. And let's go ahead and rename the file by clicking on the file and hitting return and saying folders controller. And then last but not least, let's go into the app delegate. And instead of saying view controller like that, we want to say folders controller. That will set it up good. If you compile it, it's basically going to do the same exact thing. Now, what I was talking about earlier was a UI navigation stack. The way we can set this up is by basically stuffing this folders controller inside of a UI navigation instance and then putting that as the root view controller. And then in the future, when we push view controllers onto that navigation controller, we're going to get a really clean effect like what you see here and in apps like the Messages app, the iMessages app on your iPhone. Okay, and even the Settings app. So let's go ahead and let's cut this out. Let's say nav controller. Let's go up here and let's say let nav controller is equal to UI navigation controller with a root view controller, and it says initializes and returns a newly created navigation controller. And this root view controller is obviously going to be our folders controller, okay? So go ahead and pause it and get that code in there if that was a little too fast, and you should be good to go, okay? I'll even click that so you get that whole line. Okay, now when you compile your application, you're going to see that it's kind of inside of a navigation controller and not just a view controller. Now the way we can tell is it's going to have a little header, right? Now the way we can get a title in this header is simply by going into folders controller and saying navigation item dot title. It says the navigation item's title displayed in the navigation bar is set equal to whatever title we want, right? I'll say folders. Let's go ahead and compile our application, and you're going to see now that it has a title of folders. But if you looked closely, and if you look in the iOS Notes app, you'll see that it's using that big title setting, right? Like it's not just a little title like that, it's big. So I can show you really quickly how to get that really easily with one line of code. Let's go ahead and go into our application app delegate file, and let's just say UI navigation bar.appearance dot prefers large titles is equal to true, okay? Now, this is basically going to set it up so we have that large title and everything should be looking good, and we should be set to dive headfirst into our application and start learning a lot about table views and other things, okay? So I hope you learned something in this video, and I'll see you in the very next video. See you in just a second.